President Trump has declared that peace in the Middle East is beyond very close as he presented a new plan to end the war in Gaza in the presence of the Israeli Prime Minister.
Confidence, sir, there'll be peace in Gaza anytime soon.
There was no
big day, a beautiful day, potentially one of the great days ever in civilization.
I believe that today we're taking a critical step towards both ending the war in Gaza and setting the stage for dramatically advancing peace in the Middle East. And I think beyond the Middle East, in very important Muslim countries.
Benjamin Netanyahu on board and seemingly equally optimistic. The two leaders said they'd agreed on a 20-point plan for a ceasefire, an exchange of hostages held by Hamas in return for Palestinian prisoners held by Israel, a staged Israeli withdrawal from Gaza, a transitional administration led by an international body, and the disarmament of Hamas.
The world held its breath. Cameras flashed. Reporters leaned forward. And in the grand halls of the White House, a moment was unfolding that could either reshape the Middle East or plunge it deeper into chaos. On one side of the stage stood Donald Trump, the former U.S. president, known for his unpredictable style and his bold, often divisive moves. On the other side stood Benjamin Netanyahu, Israel's prime minister, confident, defiant, and determined to press forward with Israel's long-standing goals in Gaza. Together, they unveiled what they called a 20-point Gaza Peace Plan, a plan that promised to end decades of fighting, a plan that offered the return of Israeli hostages, a plan that introduced an unprecedented body, the so-called Board of Peace, which, according to Trump, would oversee Gaza's future, including international figures like former UK Prime Minister Tony Blair. It sounded like history in the making. It sounded like hope for a land drenched in blood. But there was one critical factor missing. The people of Gaza, the fighters of Hamas, the voices of Palestinians who had endured war, displacement, and destruction for generations. Trump declared to the cameras, if Hamas doesn't accept, Israel has full backing to do what you would have to do. In those words, the world heard two possibilities: peace or war on a scale that Gaza had never seen before. And as Israel's fighter jets roared over the skies, dropping bombs on 160 targets across the Gaza Strip that very same day, many wondered, was this truly a peace plan or the start of something far more dangerous? To understand the gravity of this moment, we must go back to the roots of this conflict, back to the endless cycle of promises, betrayals, wars, and fragile truces. Because Gaza is not just a strip of land. Gaza is a symbol of defiance, a symbol of suffering, and, to some, a symbol of resistance against overwhelming odds. Generations of Palestinians have grown up in Gaza knowing little more than walls, checkpoints, and the thundering sound of warplanes above. For them, peace plans are nothing new. They have been drafted in Washington, in Oslo, in Camp David, in Cairo. Each one hailed as historic. Each one presented as the last chance. Yet, time and again, those plans collapsed into rubble and dust, just like Gaza's bombed-out neighborhoods. This is the stage on which Trump chose to announce his 20-point vision. And this is the story of what it means, not only for Gaza, not only for Israel, but for the entire Middle East, and perhaps even for the global order itself. Because when the White House speaks of peace, it often carries the echo of war. Trump's 20-point Gaza peace plan was designed to look ambitious, sweeping, and bold. To his supporters, it was proof that America was still the ultimate power broker. To his critics, it was a dangerous gamble, one that risked igniting further conflict rather than resolving it. Here's what the plan included: a complete end of fighting, a ceasefire that would stop Israel's bombardment and halt Hamas rocket attacks, return of hostages. Hamas would hand over Israeli captives, a move designed to ease pressure on Netanyahu's government. The Board of Peace. This international body, with Tony Blair as a suggested figurehead, would manage Gaza's affairs, from reconstruction to governance, effectively bypassing Hamas's control. International investment. Billions promised to rebuild Gaza's shattered infrastructure, ports, hospitals, schools, and homes. Security guarantees. Israel would retain the right to defend itself, while Hamas would be forced to disarm. And the list went on, 20 points in total, many of them focused on rebuilding, development, and international oversight. At first glance, it seemed like a lifeline, a chance for Gaza to break free from endless war and blockade. But for Hamas, and for many Palestinians, this plan carried the weight of humiliation. Why? Because it stripped Gaza of autonomy. Because it demanded surrender without true sovereignty. Because it placed Gaza's future in the hands of outsiders, the very powers Palestinians had long accused of bias and betrayal. For Trump, this was a deal, and in deals, there are winners and losers. For Netanyahu, this was leverage, a way to show Israel's strength and America's unwavering support. But for Gaza, it looked like another chapter in a long history of imposed solutions. The inclusion of Tony Blair only deepened skepticism. To many in the Middle East, Blair was not a neutral mediator, but a Western politician tied to the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Could such a figure truly guide Gaza toward peace? And what of the warning? Trump's words echoed louder than the promises of reconstruction. If Hamas doesn't accept, Israel has full backing to do what you would have to do. This was no ordinary condition. This was an ultimatum. Accept peace on Washington's terms, or face destruction. And destruction was already unfolding. Israel wasted no time. Within hours of the announcement, it struck 160 targets in Gaza, from tunnels to weapons depots, from militant bases to civilian areas caught in the crossfire. The peace plan was presented as hope, but the bombs reminded everyone of the reality. Hamas's reaction was swift. They called the plan a political trap. To them, it was not peace but capitulation. It offered no path to Palestinian sovereignty, no recognition of their struggle, no real role in shaping their destiny. Hamas leaders argued that Gaza would be reduced to an international protectorate, stripped of identity, ruled by outsiders. They warned their fighters to remain vigilant. They vowed not to surrender. On the other side, Israel celebrated. Netanyahu praised Trump's vision, calling it a historic opportunity. For him, the plan meant legitimacy. U.S. approval to tighten Israel's grip if Hamas refused. It gave Israel the green light to escalate its offensive under the banner of peace. But beyond the battlefield, the world was divided. In Washington, Trump's allies hailed it as proof of American leadership. Critics in Congress called it reckless, accusing him of pushing Gaza toward annihilation. In Europe, reactions were cautious. Some nations welcomed the idea of reconstruction and peace, while others worried it bypassed the Palestinians entirely. In the Arab world, the response was complex. Some governments, wary of their own ties to Washington, offered muted support. Others, like Qatar and Turkey, condemned the plan as an insult to Palestinian sovereignty. And in Gaza, ordinary people watched the skies turn red with fire. To them, this was not diplomacy. This was survival. Parents clutched their children in fear. Doctors raced through hospitals overwhelmed by casualties. Families buried their dead, even as world leaders debated peace. The irony was cruel. A peace plan announced with fanfare in Washington was accompanied by the thunder of bombs in Gaza. And once again, the people of Gaza were voiceless in a plan that would decide their future. The implications of Trump's Gaza Peace Plan stretch far beyond the borders of the Strip. If accepted, it could have set a precedent. International bodies managing conflict zones, imposing order at the expense of sovereignty. For some, that might sound like stability. For others, it is nothing less than neocolonialism. If rejected, as seemed likely, it provided Israel with a blank check to escalate. With U.S. backing, Netanyahu could intensify the offensive, claiming that Hamas had chosen war over peace. For the wider Middle East, this plan risked igniting fury. It threatened to deepen divides, fuel extremism, and destabilize fragile alliances. Nations like Iran would seize upon it as proof of Western hostility toward Palestinians. Militants across the region would use it to rally recruits. And for the world, it raised an uncomfortable question. Can peace ever be imposed from outside? Or must it be built from within, with the voices of those who suffer most at its heart? As Gaza burned, as the bombs fell, as the world debated, one truth remained clear. Peace cannot come through ultimatums. Peace cannot come through humiliation. Peace cannot come while the powerful dictate terms to the powerless. And so, the 20-point plan, grand in its vision, dramatic in its announcement, risks becoming just another entry in the long history of failed promises. For Gaza, the future remains uncertain. For Israel, the threat of endless conflict endures. For the world, the dream of peace slips further away. The White House may call it peace, but for the people under the bombs, it is something very different. And as history has shown time and again, when peace is built on the foundations of power rather than justice, it is destined to crumble. So, what will history say about this moment? Will it remember Trump and Netanyahu standing in the White House, promising peace, with cameras flashing and applause echoing? Or will it remember the streets of Gaza that same night, the smoke rising, the children crying, the sirens wailing as bombs rained down? Will it see this as the beginning of peace, or the continuation of war by other means? Perhaps the most haunting image is not of presidents and prime ministers, but of the ordinary people caught in the crossfire. The father digging through rubble to find his child, the mother praying for safety in the darkness, the child who asks why the world always watches but never saves them. These are the voices left out of peace plans. These are the lives that carry the cost of decisions made far away. And until those voices are heard, until justice, dignity, and sovereignty are part of the solution, peace in Gaza will remain an illusion. The White House may draw maps. Leaders may sign documents. International figures may give speeches. But peace is not paper. Peace is not press conferences. Peace is freedom. Peace is justice. Peace is the right to live without fear. And until that day comes, Gaza will remain not just a battlefield, but a symbol of resilience, of struggle, and of the unfinished fight for dignity. The world may call this a peace plan, but history will judge whether it was truly peace, or just another step deeper into the storm.